What's up with it? Another grand morning this morning. Up yours, COVID number 7. So the first one, the boy stood on the burning deck, and all the sort of comical bastardisations of that particular poem, and there are a lot. The boy stood on the burning deck with a pocket full of crackers. A spark went up his trouser leg and burnt his kneecap. Things like that. And when this poem was published, people were very, very quick to apply that kind of humour to it. It was written by a woman called Felicia Dorothea Hemans, and she was born in 1793 and died in 1835. She was a prolific writer from Liverpool. She's a Liverpudlian, and the poem Casabianca was written in 1862, and it's about an actual incident that occurred on a French man-of-war, their flagship actually, at the Battle of the Nile. The French ship L'Orient, and on board was a young man called Giocanti. He was the young son of the ship's commander, Louis de Casabianca. And this son, various accounts put him at the age of between 10 and 13. Nobody quite knows for sure. And this young lad, he actually remained at his post on board the ship and perished when the ship's magazine exploded. Not a nice way to go. I suppose it were quick. This French boy, Giocanti, who was at the time an enemy of England, some thought that Felicia, was being subversive in glorifying the discipline and devotion to duty of an enemy, this young lad. I think Hemans were probably trying to excite a competitive spirit amongst young Englishmen or young English boys. And this poem certainly stirs your imagination, and it I don't know, for me it brings powerful imagery to mind. So here we go, Casabianca by Felicia Hemans. The boy stood on the burning deck, whence all but he had fled. The flame that lit the battle's wreck shone round him o'er the dead. Yet beautiful and bright he stood, as born to rule the storm, a creature of heroic blood, a proud though childlike form. The flames rolled on, he would not go without his father's word. That father, faint in death below, his voice no longer heard. He called aloud, "Say, father, say, if yet my task is done." He knew not that the chieftain lay unconscious to his son. "Speak, father," once again he cried, "if I may yet be gone." And but the booming shots replied, and fast the flames rolled on. Upon his brow he felt their breath, and in his waving hair, and looked from that lone post of death in still yet brave despair, and shouted but once more aloud, "My father, must I stay?" Whilst o'er him fast through sail and shroud the wreathing fires made way. They wrapped the ship in splendour wild, they caught the flag on high, and streamed above the gallant child like banners in the sky. There came a burst of thunder sound, the boy, oh, where was he? Ask of the winds that far around with fragments strewed the sea. With mast and helm and pennon fair, that well had borne their part, but the noblest thing which perished there was that young faithful heart. Proper brings a lump to your throat, that. Does mine anyway. And like I've mentioned once or twice before, that's what poetry's all about. If it can stir your soul, if it can bring forth emotion in you, whether it just be a lump in your throat or floods of tears or laughter or happiness, then that poem's done its job, and all credit to the author. So that were Casabianca. So while his father were dead below decks, this young lad were proving his devotion to duty and his discipline, and he were forlornly shouting for his father, asking him, "Can I go, Dad? Can I go? Can I abandon ship?" Because his dad were dead. So he stayed there doing his duty. I don't know what it were. I mean, at that age, looking back to kind of Nelson's Navy, they had young lads of 10, 11, 12, 13 as powder boys, and they'd carry the gunpowder from the holds to Canon, and they'd replenish their cannonballs, and which he might have been one of them. He might have been a cabin boy, he might have been, I don't know, did they have midshipmen that young? I don't know. A snotty, as they're called in Royal Navy. But it brings a phrase to mind that some may know and some may not. When you hear the saying, "It's cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey." Well, I always thought that there were a monkey made out of brass, and it was that cold his balls dropped off. Far from it. A monkey is actually a rack that they stack the cannonballs on at the side of the cannon. It's kind of a ready locker of ammunition. In extreme cold, well, these monkeys were made of brass, they were called monkeys, which held the cannonballs. In extreme cold, these monkeys would contract, like brass does very well, and they'd contract to such an extent that it had squeezed the cannonballs off the rack. So it were cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey. There you go. I just thought I'd throw that in. So that was Felicia Dorothea Hemans. I think I've pronounced it right. The next one, as is my wont, to do a double whammy. It's I remember this from my childhood days, not particularly at school, but from a book of poetry I had when I was quite young. Written by a guy called Hilary Belloc. His actual name was Joseph Hilary Pierre René Belloc. A lot of French in that, which explains he was a British-French poet. He was a writer and a historian, a prolific writer, and Catholicism, his faith, had a profound effect on his work. It were a theme going through all his writings and thinkings. His work divided opinion, kind of Marmite-like. You either loved it or you hated it. Possibly you loved it because you were a Catholic, and possibly you hated it because you were a Protestant. But it certainly divided opinion. He had outspoken views on radical social and economic change and reforms, all grounded in the idea of a European Catholic state. A bit like a 19th century European Union, really, with Catholicism thrown in. Well, a lot of Europe is Catholic. He even served as a Liberal MP in House of Commons for a while. And the moral of Matilda, really, it's quite simple. It's to tell the truth. Be good and tell the truth. Avoid lies and pranks, especially pranks involving London Fire Brigade. But the main moral of this story is don't lie and don't cry wolf. We all know the story of what happened to the boy who cried wolf. So you just don't do it. So right, Matilda by Hilary Belloc. Matilda told such dreadful lies, it made one gasp and stretch one's eyes. Her aunt, who from her earliest youth had kept a strict regard for truth, attempted to believe Matilda. The effort very nearly killed her, and would have done so had not she discovered this infirmity. For once, towards the close of day, Matilda, growing tired of play, and finding she was left alone, went tiptoe to the telephone, and summoned the immediate aid of London's noble fire brigade. Within an hour the gallant band were pouring in on every hand, from Putney, Hackney, Downs and Bow. With courage high and hearts aglow, they galloped roaring through the town. Matilda's house is burning down, inspired by British cheers and loud proceedings from the frenzied crowd. They ran their ladders through a score of windows on the ballroom floor, and took particular pains to souse the pictures up and down the house, until Matilda's aunt succeeded in showing them that they were not needed, and even then she had to pay to make the men go away. It happened that a few weeks later her aunt was off to the theatre to see that interesting play, The Second Mrs. Tanqueray. She had refused to take her niece to hear this entertaining piece, a deprivation just and wise, to punish her for telling lies. That night a fire did break out. You should have heard Matilda shout. You should have heard her scream and bawl and throw the windows up and call to people passing in the street, the rapidly increasing heat encouraging her to obtain their confidence, but all in vain. For every time she shouted fire, they all answered, little liar. And therefore, when her aunt returned, Matilda and the house were burned. What a last line. Oh dear. It's funny and not funny, that. It's tragic. But there is that strong moral. Don't cry wolf. But that's it, a double whammy. That seems to have gone very, very quickly. Right, I've done 15 minutes. This is going to be a long one to upload this. So I'll give my usual salute to COVID-19. Up yours. Stay safe, people. Stay indoors. We'll get over this thing. Just stay indoors as much as you can. Says he sitting in his garden. Well, there you go. You can sit in your garden. Social distancing. Very important. 2 meters apart. My thoughts are with everybody that's been stricken with this, particularly in countries like Italy, Spain and the United States, who's going to be fast overtaking Spain as worst hit country in the world. It's got to Yemen. That is going to be disastrous, because the whole world is ignoring Yemen's plight. There's millions starving to death and being murdered in an evil war. I don't know. I can't do anything about it, but only pray. If you've got a God, may he or she go with you. If you haven't, spend your life in peace and happiness. Bye for now. Still love it. Catch you later.